You're listening to Radigan's Rockcast, a series focused on talking about music from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even current. Now, here's your host, Tom Radigan.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to Radigan's Rockcast. I am, of course, your host, Tom Radigan. Welcome if it's on WMYO, YouTube, Anchor, Amazon, Spotify, Castos, wherever you are on, I am glad you are on. Okay, so let's begin. Let's talk about the Beatles album, Rubber Soul. So we've talked about Please Please Me. We talked about With the Beatles. We talked about A Hard Day's Night. We talked about Beatles for Sale. And we just talked about Help. Now it's time to go into a totally different direction with the Beatles album. So let's talk a little history. So this album was released on December 3rd of 1965. This was, of course, the same year earlier that the Beatles did Help around, because that album came out on August 6th, and that was recorded during the times of like February, around that time in the early years of in the early months of 65. Rubber Soul is an album that, you know, a lot of people think highly of. It's definitely an album that changed music as we know it. We'll talk about the impact of it and all that, and what it did for rock and roll music. But the thing about Rubber Soul is, you know, it was their second album with original material. It was a direction where they were realizing that they could go more mature in their songwriting even more. That was the really change of it. I mean, of course, there were changes in the sound. Sitar is used for the first time in the song Norwegian Wood. And, you know, has a lot of folk rock, vibes to it. Definitely different from what they were doing on their previous album, Help. It's so kind of weird in a sense to me to thinking that both of these albums were done in the same year, considering that there's a complete different shift. And, this is an album that, of course, a lot of, like I said, a lot of rock critics, rock musicians, praise. Brian Wilson claimed that Rubber Soul was his inspiration for the Beach Boys' iconic album Pet Sounds. And then, of course, Paul was then inspired to do Sgt. Pepper. So it was a chain of, influence. But this was the album that started that. And, we've already talked a little bit, I've already mentioned Norwegian Wood, so why don't we talk about that as one of the first songs on this album, because this is a song that a lot of people mention, a lot of people consider this one of their favorite songs, and the thing about Norwegian Wood is that, so it's got, this great guitar style, and I have no idea what that was, but people, I guess, are partying. But, okay. So, anyway. But Norwegian Wood was such a great song, in a sense, of this, John, in Help, he was opening up about his life. And Norwegian Wood opens up about this affair he had with this woman, and the line works perfectly, in a sense, I once had a girl, or should I say she once had me, and it's about this affair that is weird and how unusual it is, in a sense. This woman was a different person that he had an affair with for that moment, and it was known. I mean, of course, the Beatles, of course, even though they had their wives, of course they cheat on them. They all live that rock and roll lifestyle. They sow their wild oats, as they say, in all that sense. But yeah, no, it's an interesting thing of just John being so serious with himself and being serious to, his wife Cynthia, because, she had no idea what this meant of of why he's pouring his heart off and really confessing about his infidelity and all that stuff, so, yeah, but hey, the thing about the song that makes it more interesting is the guitar work that George does on it. The harmonies, of course, between Paul and John. A lot of people even talk about how this is a great album for harmonies and all that. And another way to talk about this, another great song that has beautiful harmonies and, gets more, kind of a story, has more of a story to it. Sort of, this would, I would say, maybe be inspired by Bob Dylan in a sense, which is Nowhere Man. He's a real, just the way of how the harmonies go into introduce the hook of the song. And I think, the lyrics are interesting about, somebody who's like a drifter in a sense. But, yeah, and of course, a lot of people, there's definitely some Dylan inspiration to it, especially even through this album. Everybody, like Bob Dylan was, becoming the biggest voice of the time. I mean, in the 1960s, you had the Beatles, Bob Dylan, and the Stones. They were like the face of rock and roll of the 60s, and definitely Dylan. Even as much as a innovator the Beatles were, Dylan even inspired them to think outside the box more creatively and all that. And of course the song opens up with a song that everybody loves to talk about, with the beep 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 beep, and can you guess it? Yeah, and that's right. Yeah, it's Baby, Can You Drive My Car? I've always loved this song. I've always thought this is one of their fun songs, and it's funny how this starts off the album and all that, because, like I said, the album has more sophisticated songs, so it's funny how it starts off with a fun song, to kind of like, surprise, like, up, like, it's a little bit of, we're still the same people, but we're going to show you something different. And then that's what when Norwegian Wood transitions in. So it's great how those are the first two songs on the album. Drive My Car is first, and then Norwegian Wood. But, yeah, that works well. I mean, the guitar solo on Drive My Car is good. Harmonies, I mean, of course, the beep, beep, beep is great. I mean, I remember I knew what the song was before, by listening to this Elmo album, where Elmo is singing about drive my car, because Elmo speaks in, of course, like third person. So it's like, Elmo, you can drive my car. Yeah. And, that's what I remember of my childhood, people. Yeah. But, a few songs on this album that, are not, maybe well known that we'll talk about, and then we'll end it off with one of the best songs of all time, I think. But let's talk about some underrated songs on this album, or songs that really not a lot of people might know about. And that's the third track, You Won't See Me, which is a song that Paul does. It's a simple song. It's not like, one of my favorites, but it's definitely an interesting song. Like I've said before, there are no bad Beatles songs. There might be some songs you don't listen to, or that songs that you think are better than others, but I don't think there's ever really a bad Beatles song or like, oh my god, it's so horrible, turn off. Well, wait, there's actually one back at the... Oh, well, we'll get to that when it comes about. But, and, people will know why, in a sense. I mean, the Beatles had some stuff in their songs that were very different, experimental, that didn't work. I mean, they experimented with a lot of stuff that worked, some that didn't, but but with this song, it's very simple, just a very simple rock driven song. Another song that I think gets a little bit more mentioned is the song that John and Paul do, which is Wait. Wait is a great song because just got like another of that rock harmony to it. I like Paul's line around, like, I guess it would be the bridge and all that stuff. Yeah. And so those songs, a few songs that definitely I think express the 60s, of course, is The Word. I've always loved that. It's such a such a heavy powered like piano, and of course, like, say the word and you'll be free. John always just has this voice where he can go soft and then he can go wild, and he goes wild a little bit throughout the end of it too, of the song. And I've always loved that song. I've always, as a kid, always found it interesting. I was actually just listening to it earlier. It's a song that people talk about. I remember I went to this show one time with my grandfather, where it was at a local library, and it was this Beatles show, like this family, this mother, daughter, and father, singing some Beatles tunes, and of course one of the first ones is that they did was The Word, and like the word is love, like yeah, have you heard the word is love? It's so fine, it's sunshine, it's the word love. And now let's talk a little bit about George's songs on the album. George has two songs on the album that both I love. A song that gets mentioned a lot from this album that he did is If I Needed Someone, that I've heard people talk about a lot. I've always loved that one. I think, still a little bit of that Lennon McCartney style to it. It's nice. The backing vocals from John and Paul are good on this. George does this well. It's actually funny if you want to see a laugh, because when the Beatles were performing around this time, that's when they were getting tired of performing because nobody could barely hear them. They could barely hear them, barely hear themselves because all you could hear was girls screaming so loud. You couldn't hear them at all, really, and they were just getting really tired of it. And there's a performance of them in Tokyo in 1966 of them performing "If I Needed Someone," and you can barely hear them and all that. And they sound a little off key too, because they can barely hear what's going on because the girls are so loud and all that. But a song that I never hear anybody else mention to me is "Think for Yourself." And that, I think, is my favorite song from George on this album. I remember hearing this for the first time on the Yellow Submarine Soundtrack album, which is also where I heard of course, Nowhere Man. This song, I think, works well as George going more into his own, showing that George can shine as a songwriter. George has his moments, and this song just proves it. This song makes you wonder, what will George do next? It just shows you that George should have more songs. George has a voice, and this song works well with that, especially with the guitar work on it too, is creative. As well. So let's talk about a song that is considered controversial in a sense, which is "Run for Your Life," which ends the album. Now, "Run for Your Life," of course, has very, dark lyrics in a sense, and I'll just say it here, before we go any further. And the lyrics are, "Well, I'd rather see you dead, little girl, than to be with another man." Not the most charming words you hear, really. You want somebody to say it to you. But, it's funny because I saw, and I'm not a huge fan of TikTok. I think TikTok is very toxic. And, people always, I feel like, to criticize the Beatles and all that stuff and really like to rip into them. And they always, talk about this song. And listen, yes, this song was controversial. But you know what, people? People who don't know this and are just, adding on to this trend. John Lennon admitted that he hated this song. John Lennon admitted that these lyrics were controversial. Did you know that when you posted the video? No, I didn't think so. But yeah. No. So, he talked about over the years how, this song might have not been the best song for him. And, he talks about in the song, that I'm a wicked guy and I was born with a jealous mind. And, maybe he was adding on his, talks about jealousy. But it's funny, how it has the line, "Well, I'd rather see you dead, little girl, than to be with another man," because that was used in the Elvis Presley song in 1955, "Baby, Let's Play House." So, definitely an interesting kind of, because I remember when I hear that, it's it's the same lyric, and because in that song, it's more, it's so out of the blue when you hear that line in "Baby, Let's Play House." In this, it already has a dark tone, I mean, hell, the song is already "Run for Your Life," But, no. It's, whatchamacallit, crazy, man, crazy. But another song that always gets a lot of a look at was "Girl," which is John's song about, will anybody listen to his story about the girl that came to stay? And what's clever about this is, of course, the words on this, the lyrics, when she told me she was young, pain would lead to pleasure. I mean, going from songs like, I want to hold your hand, or going from lyrics saying, when I touch you, I feel happy inside, to, when she told me she was young, that pain would lead to pleasure. It's in a sense, it's almost like when you're a kid and you, know about, you love this certain stuff, but you grow older and you want to experience more in life. That's what kind of these albums are doing. It's kind of you're growing. It's in a sense, it's their albums, their songs, they're maturing in a sense of their ways and wisdom of the world, or, it's almost like in a sense of maybe you can analyze these songs as somebody, listening to them at first as like, when you're a kid. For me, when I was a kid, of course, I would identify more with the lovey-dovey songs. But then when you get older, you start to realize more what John was saying and all that stuff, and what Paul was saying too. So it works as well when you hear a song like that. Another song on this album that's really fun to sing, and I've always loved singing it, is "I'm Looking Through You," that Paul sings. It's just a catchy, song. The melody is catchy. Paul's, enthusiastic voice on it works, and all that. Just very happy. And then, of course, there's the beat at the end, like the bum 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 bum. Yeah. And but another song that's really considered a standard for Paul is Michelle. Very has some even French in it, and definitely soft, definitely a little eerie in a sense in the music style, but does it work? Yeah, it does. Just, that little, the harmonies. I mean, Paul just, it's funny because it's the melody isn't a strong one. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just completely soft, but it works well. And the backing vocals from John and George just work too. I remember too when there was that big ceremony for Paul in 2010 that Barack Obama did, and Paul saying that to Michelle Obama is Michelle and all that, which is a really cool thing to see and all that. It's a song that is still considered a classic for the Beatles, and of course for Paul McCartney as well. And then we've got the Ringo song on this album, which is "What Goes On," and this is the only song where the Lennon and McCartney credit looks different. It's Lennon, McCartney, and Starkey, because Ringo is considered a co-writer of the song, even though he really it's learned that he really didn't write that much. He added just a little touch to it, but they gave him a songwriting credit in it anyway. The song actually goes back early in 1963 of John doing this as like a ditty as a demo. You can find it on YouTube, but it even goes back to even the Quarrymen, and all that stuff, and they realized they needed a song on the album. And I guess they took an early song of theirs and they're like, I guess we'll give it to Ringo, but it's like, oh, we need an early song, why don't we just I don't know how good it is, so why don't we just give it to Ringo? He'll like it. But no, this song, I mean, the thing that's interesting about this song is you could tell that they wrote this early on in like 57 or 58, because it still has that 50s style beat to it, it's got a little bit of Carl Perkins quality. When I think of this, I think of their version of Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby, and people have compared that, and I think it's even compared to George was doing like the riff of Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby in this song. And when I hear Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby, I hear both of the similarities, and it's almost like a Mandela effect. When Everybody Tries My Baby, when Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby ends, I think of the ending riff in What's Going On. Whenever I think, once it's like, Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby now, I think of the bum 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 bum, which is at the end of, What's Going On. But, and an interesting thing too is it's a little funny thing I've noticed. I noticed only about a year or two ago of where when Ringo goes in the lyrics it's so easy for a girl like you to lie, tell me why. John says in it you can hear him say, we already told you why, which is from referring to, of course, Tell Me Why. I do like Ringo singing on this song. I do think he sings this well. I think this is one of actually his best singing songs, I think. Honestly, he's it's like you can hear Ringo's low voice. You could tell that maybe he doesn't have the best voice, but it works well. Maybe not the best voice as to John and Paul, but he sings it pretty good. And all that. So now let's go to my favorite song, which is something that is always so beautiful to listen to, is "In My Life." I actually did a video about this, a few years ago, because I'm in my first semester at college. I had to write a paper of what I think is considered the best, the best type of writing out there, and I put John Lennon's, I put the song "In My Life," and I think "In My Life" is a good example of writing. And it actually started out because John was originally going to do the song about his life. He wanted to do it kind of biographical, by talking about, towns and all that stuff. And, he realized, I think, that it didn't work, and, just glossing over the fact of his life, and it's such a beautiful thing that I think we all can relate to at times in our life. There are places I remember, of us, when we're older, we're remembering stuff as a child, of like places that we went to as a child, places that we consider like our second homes, some are dead and some are living, it's a song that I think adds so much beauty, and I think it brings such a, it's such a beauty, because when I remember listening to it as a kid, and I remember crying, I remember like getting really emotional hearing it, and I still get that emotional feeling when I hear it, because it's so beautiful too, of just, it's like, the circle of life in a sense, of, just of what, in your life, and just of, the people that are your close unit of friends, the person you might love the most and all that. It's the piano, solo that George Martin does is great, and the funniest thing is they had to speed up because George Martin really couldn't play it that fast. So yeah, in the so they speed it up and all that on the record. But yeah, no, I mean, John, I think this is a song that definitely identifies John Lennon. I think this is probably one of John Lennon's best songs. I mean, I would say this is just as good as Strawberry Fields, not yesterday, he didn't write it yesterday, but like Strawberry Fields or Imagine. This is one of his most signature songs ever, and I think it works on who he is. This was a guy who experienced a lot of pain growing up, having, his father, walk out on him when he was a young child, to having his aunt raise him in a sense, really, gaining a relationship with his mother when he was a teenager, and then shortly after having to, deal with her, dying and all that stuff, because she got killed by a driver and all that. And, also, Stuart Sutcliffe, who was a part of the Beatles for a little bit, his best friend, he died too, I think he was able to put a lot of his pain into songwriting, and I think that's the thing. When you go through so much pain, I think you can, and if you are an artist or you have that artist mindset, you can create something beautiful out of it, and that's what John does on this song. So that's it for today's podcast. Really appreciate wherever you listening to it, whether that's on Spotify, Amazon Music. I'm not going to go for the whole spiel. You get the whole spiel because I said that in the beginning. All right, well, thank you guys, and see you guys later. Bye.